Hi, Darren. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Elite Mind Insights with Elite Mind Academy. And those are our weekly conversations where we are discussing a variety of topics from organizational well-being and organizational development industry. And we are often talk about topics that stay behind the closed doors and bring out some more of the challenging discussions um, into um, into the daylight. So today we have a very special guest, Darren, and Darren Shurmer. He's very well known learning and development consultant, and he's worked with many organizations to help them align their communication strategies and set up their learning infrastructure and including content creation and PR and facilitating events and wider organizational alignment. So I'm really, really glad to have you, Darren, for this topic, as this time we are discussing communication in organizations and what is the role of that in building employee well-being, satisfaction, and company culture as well. So hello, Darren. Would you like to share a little bit more about yourself and about your work that you've done and your views maybe on the importance of communication?
Yeah, I mean, communication is one of the essential parts of organizations. It's the way that you get your employees to come with you on the direction that you want your business to be going in. They're the real tools that's going to get you to the location that you need to be. I've worked in learning and development for many years. I've done a lot of customer training. I've done a lot of kind of the standard onboarding stuff, the career pathways, every type of training you can think of, from sales enablement all the way through to getting people really well equipped to kind of continue their careers and really flourish within organizations. We've done that. And what's nice is there's such a kind of merger between what is good communications and what is good education. And the data that comes off the back of it, if you're using good systems and you've got a good content strategy and you've got a good plan for how you're going to attack the problems your business has, you can actually fuse all of your learning development needs and all of your internal comms needs into one powerful tool that educates, informs, and inspires your workforce. And I'm really lucky that I've done a lot of work with that. I've rolled out mental health programs with partnerships with different companies. There's been a lot we've been able to put together. And when you have both sides of it under your remit, you're able to not just create the content and get it on a platform, but you can then advertise it and draw people to it and market people to the content that you've got.
Yeah, great. So let's look maybe to get started. Let's look at some of these key areas and key themes that we are seeing that companies are struggling with. And obviously now we are also, as part of Elite Mind Academy, we are doing this well-being design project to design national guidelines for well-being strategy and implementation frameworks. And we always start with audits. We always start with surveys and interviews and really understanding employee needs and their unmet needs as well in that, and then looking at how well companies currently meeting those needs. And communication is really the central piece connecting all of the dots there, because we have to first know expectations of the organizations. We need to know how people feel. We need to know what's going well and what doesn't, in order to then customize and tailor some of those support initiatives, right? So I think very often we see some of those, off-the-shelf solutions. Some of them are great, but if they are not directly mapped to what your people need and what is relevant to your organization, then we are potentially wasting money investing in something that is not relevant or not needed for organizations. So yeah, let's look at some of those key areas of what do you see as well going wrong with some of the clients, with some of the organizations that you worked with, and then we can look at what needs to happen and how can we fix that. What are some of the key areas that we can apply to improve. Yeah. So what are some of the main areas, Darren, that you are seeing as well, with some common issues?
I think the one you see jumping out the most is normally the technology that people are signing quite expensive contracts for and jumping straight in with. I think it's sometimes hard because businesses want to have this momentum. They want to feel like, yes, we've bought something, now we can do something with that because we've got the thing that we've just bought. But actually, you need to rewind and do a lot more research before you start buying something. Like, these are typically kind of 3-year plus contracts you're signing up to for all these managed services. So you've got to really be sure that the thing you're buying is going to tick the boxes for what you need. So you mentioned audits just now. This is crucial. A lot of companies already have a lot of good data already, but it's in different systems. It's telling just pure facts or pure kind of numbers, as opposed to really telling the story that will help you influence your plan going forward. So one of the things you look at quite often is companies will have employee satisfaction surveys. They'll do these little pulse questionnaires every now and again. You might have lots of data in your learning management system. You might have a SharePoint site somewhere that's got lots of data coming in from it. It's all very separate. And those those numbers in isolation don't actually tell you a story that tells you where your organization is necessarily broken. So for instance, if you're looking at your organization, you're trying to train them up to sell a particular product. One side is looking at the metrics for how many people have done the training in that, but actually marrying that vanity set of figures up with real data around branch by branch or department by department who is actually selling that, and correlating with actually this group of people have done all the training, and we can see in the sales data that they're now actually starting to really sell and people retain on packages and all this type of stuff. That's the story you want to build. And I think too many times you'll get an IT system or an HR system all working in isolation from all of the different kind of data sources they need. Without that fusion together, you can start drawing wrong conclusions of what's working and what's not working.
Yeah, and I think definitely what you're highlighting here is something that we are also seeing very often, is this lack of alignment between different departments, between different teams, but also between different seniority levels of organization, right? So very often, I think we go in and do our interviews and audits, and senior leadership usually have very distorted view of their organization, and most of the time very kind of idolized view, that they think everything is great, and their company is amazing, and therefore that information of their leadership vision and mission and what they're working on kind of tends to get cascaded down one way stream, right, of communication, right? But it's very rare where that communication also flows other direction. And you mentioned already, let's say, employee satisfaction surveys, but doing them in a way that very often those surveys, they don't give a full picture because of the way that we ask those questions, but also it's the fact that it's your employers are asking, that sometimes employees are not willing to be truthful and honest and open. So we get this distorted data and these kind of lies that we then end up making our strategic decisions on. And in ideal scenario, of course, you want CEO and the cleaner to have the same view of the organization, and to be aligned in terms of what are we trying to achieve together as a company. Where are we going, what is the direction, what is my role in this, what is your role in that journey, and really being very clear on that. So we definitely see a lot of alignment, and also very often these different departments have their own processes, their own ways of working, and there is a lot of waste of resources that departments are, let's say, creating their own, even, let's say, uh, recruitment processes, right? There are some organizations that have their own recruitment processes. Some of them recruit in a very different way than different department. They use different agencies, they use different application forms, which is again, it's a duplication of resources, and it's a waste of effort, and it's waste of those resources. How do we conduct one-to-ones, for example, right? Managers, when they have their meetings with their teams, Some of them create very beautiful sequences and processes and even their own templates and documents for facilitating those conversations. But then it doesn't really translate to the rest of the organization to say, okay, well, you're welcome to do extra, right? But this is the minimum standard that we as a company aim to have in our communications, all the way from how we hire people, how we train them, how we develop them, how we then check in and follow up with them. So this alignment, I think definitely it's a huge piece to fix, and probably one of the easiest ways of addressing it, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some challenges, and I think, organizations as they start to scale sometimes get caught a little bit unaware as to how fragmented all of their processes are. When you're in that kind of small scale up, really growing, the agility and the ability for Joe Bloggs just to go out and speak to a recruiter that they know from previous years and say, get me one of these people, that becomes a lot harder when you become a 2,000-3,000 employee company to maintain that way. So I get how companies get themselves into this state. I think where you see the more mature companies, you then start having slightly different problems, that the individual departments often find themselves very caught up in big, very very elongated processes that are there to maintain the financial structure and all of the processes that they need to make sure people are not overspending willy-nilly, but also to avoid any risk. And that can slow things down drastically. And you often see when companies are transitioning from this kind of small enterprise to more enterprise, that a lot of the motivation saps out of the people in your company, because suddenly they're facing challenges they've never had to do. Everything takes longer. Getting approvals on things they never needed takes so much longer. And you see that feedback coming through in employee satisfaction surveys. You see it a lot. Operational efficiency, every company I've worked for, no matter how big or small, has this label of operational efficiency and a real challenge to overcome that. And a lot of the time, it never goes anywhere from the feedback, because it's just the department that people are in that are reviewing this survey data and trying to fix what they can. Where you've got these big kind of, it's the finance team that controls all of this, all the different business units, all the different teams. They can't influence that finance team to change anything. So the stuff which comes up time and time again is often the bloat of more controlling departments that have got their bits, and they're not worried if it's taking a long time for your purchase order to get approved. They're making sure that you're not spending 10 grand more than you need to be spending. So you've got this alignment in that side of things that you'll never resolve particularly easily until the leadership team wants to really push that at a corporate level down.
Absolutely. And I think the thing is as well here, when we talk about, some of those systems and processes, of course, different departments work differently, and they have different goals and targets and objectives to achieve, right? So I think definitely we need to consider that. But I think what you've already kind of alluded about, some of these kind of more of a softer areas of how we communicate, and kind of even the fear of letting go of control, and not trusting our people, not necessarily even having sometimes right knowledge, skills, and awareness to do this right, and go and kind of have the impact and influence in your organization that goes beyond just your role or your department, right? And one of the other areas that we are seeing there, that sometimes companies go in, like you mentioned, some of those wonderful platforms, they put in, the software and tech infrastructure, but actually they don't give people skills required to then have those real human conversations. So, for example, performance management, right? You can put in the most elaborate performance management system, but unless you're really teaching people how to have those uncomfortable conversations, that's not going to happen. You can set up a system for mental health support, but unless you have, if you have to go still through the human being to enter that platform, to have access to it, you still need to have all of the skills to manage those uncomfortable conversations. And that's what not happening. And it kind of, then it stops people from even using that technology in a right way and engaging with it in a right way. And there's always this balance, right? Communication, it's supposed to be human, and therefore the tech is only facilitating, supposed to be just facilitating the transfer of this human knowledge, skills, and yeah, it has to be conversational as much as possible, rather than kind of like one way direction. And yeah, that skills building capacity, I think it's really, really crucial. So thank you for those who are watching. Thank you, Rob. Saying the difference between huge companies and small ones is huge. There's a lot of good and bad in each. Definitely, I think there is a lot of difference between sizes of the companies, like Darren said, but it's also between different industries, and different areas of work have their own unique challenges that definitely we need to be aware of. And I think as independent consultants, we are in a very privileged position to actually see the differences, and then that allows us to kind of transfer some of those best practices, but also share what doesn't work and some of the risks and threats that are sometimes, when we are in that our own cocooned environment, we only know what we know, and we don't know what we don't know. So it's really, really valuable to have this external view where somebody else can say, well, actually, you know what, that's what we did at Medivet, this is what works very well at Sony, this is what we have done in this previous company, and this was the feedback. And there's really a lot of value in having this alignment, not only just within organization and the departments, but actually really looking at much, much broader context. How can we align the human communication, right? And including your clients, your customers, including your, again, when you talk about brand communication, that's again, how can we appeal to the right clients? Do we attract the right employees to work for our company? So I think we really need to think about communication in much more broader human context, rather than just saying, oh, this is just a tech, and something that, one way cascade of information that just channeled via some social media channels. So yeah,
you want to almost get a balance between comms that you're pushing out because they're necessary. Like there's no way you've got to be showing how well the company's doing. You've got to be saying that there's changes that are coming, organizational updates. You've got to be pushing that out. But you need to have a really good balance with content that people want to pull for themselves as well. You want to generate that curiosity within the organization to either learn and develop themselves, or actually just to be more inquisitive about what's going on in organizations. Another one you see in employee satisfaction surveys a lot is people's belief that they don't have opportunities to develop, they don't have opportunities to build their career. But how many times do you see companies really advertising the wealth of learning and how you get onto it? How many times do companies barrier it off so you can't do the management training until you've become a manager? How many times do you see companies putting in this, your manager has to approve anything that's going on, rather than you actually just thinking, no, this is what will benefit me? But how often do you see those case studies of the success factors within the organization where Joe Bloggs has gone away and has absolutely learned everything they need to do, or maybe they've studied for a master's and MBA somewhere, and suddenly they're now stepping into a leadership role, a product management role. They've evolved themselves, they've grown their job, and then they've been given that next step off the back of it. You don't really see too much of that. You hear the stories, that person's been promoted, but a lot of time people make up their own stories in their head. If they don't see that this person's been doing tons of work in the background to get them to that point, they'll assume it's just been gifted, or they've been lucky, or they just knew that person. Whereas there's a lot of work that happens behind the scenes that you need to showcase as to how they've got there.
Definitely. I think the transparency of how you got there, right? And transparency about opportunities to learn, opportunities to develop, opportunities to make an impact, that it's not necessarily limited to your own specific role and job description. And I think Valentina is asking here a very well question in that, Darren, from your experience, how would you say we can influence company culture to support open, constructive communication? And I think this is something as well that when we look at this kind of more human element of communication, and Jacinta also commented about that, saying, yes, communication is human, technology is a facilitator. And definitely, like when we look at the environment in which we communicate, and creating some of those safe spaces in which it's safe for us to ask for support, to ask for information, to share what we know, to share our knowledge and skills, and create some of these kind of more of a um, ecosystem of communications and transfer of knowledge and skills. What else we can do to influence that culture of support?
It, it's the language leaders use, which I think is the absolute crucial piece. I've seen some, let's say, not so good examples of leadership where their mantra is, "Don't bring me problems, bring me solutions." And it's like, well, I don't need to know the entire organization to know that there's a problem in this area, and I certainly can't fix that problem for myself. So you get a lot of leaders which will use this language. I get it, they're busy, they don't want to be taken on the nuances of everything, but actually you need a forum where people can say, this really is not working. And we keep coming up against these barriers, but this is well away from my department or what's there. I know what needs to happen. I know the process that would work better, but how to get that implemented, I can't help you with that. That's not my area. So you need these forums where you can have those discussions. But also, I mean, some of the best managers I've ever worked for, and a lady called Anna at Medivet, when she was there, was one of the best managers I've ever had. That she was just clear in, I want us to achieve this, and she was very open with, do it however you want. We can do it this way, that way, that way. It's down to you to pick the way you do it. Create something, do however you want. As long as I get this as an outcome,
Yeah.
that's fine. And if you're having problems, I'm here to support you. If you need introducing to a certain team to get a connection there, to get something moving, or you're having problems getting information out of something, or whatever it happens to be, I'm here to support you. But this is what I want. This is kind of roughly when I want it being done by. Off you go and fill your boots. And once you get that, you can then start copying those behaviors, and you become a better manager off the back of that, and start cascading that down to your teams. And I think those open conversations around, okay, we've got these options and these options, and then wanting to pin you down to just that, can kind of really mess you up. So I've had some really good managers on that side of things, but the further up the organization, the less open they are to seeing what the problems are within organizations, which is normally where the employee satisfaction surveys fall down, because if they don't want to deal with the problems in it, and they're just comparing themselves to other companies in their space, then you're not going to see the investment or the time needed in fixing the problems.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's really, really crucial. Jacinta also is adding some more comments about, the role of leader and role modeling the right behaviors and communications, and really making sure that you're setting up some of the norms and rewarding the right communication, right? And kind of reinforcing what you want to see more of. Absolutely. And I think the role of leaders is crucial there. And you're rightly pointing out that the higher you go in that hierarchy, the the more you get detached from the reality. And there are some examples. Let's say in Pret a Manger, we had every person in head office would have their own called buddy store, and every quarter they would actually go and spend a week in that store, working as a team member, and really seeing the problem, seeing the reality, being engaged in that. And I think it's so crucial that companies do that, and at whatever hierarchy you are in that company, to find a system that allows leaders never to get too far from the reality of these daily operations, and what people are struggling with. But it's also about, again, going back to these human communications, and again, not necessarily speaking to each person as a manager to employee, or a CEO to manager, but really just having human to human conversations, and really looking at, okay, we have this common shared vision, this is what we are going to achieve. How we get there it's open to each department, to each person. They have a freedom to create their own ways of contributing, and that's supposed to be valued. Because if people are given freedom to deliver, for as long as it still stays on track, like this is where our organization is going, it can really create very supportive environment where people are always looking for those solutions, and they are willing to solve problems, and much more eager to then hear, what's not working and what's actually stopping us from getting there. So yeah, definitely the role of leadership and having that clarity of direction and vision in terms of this is where our company is going, having very clear what, but being flexible on the how, and empowering people and giving them that safe space to explore the problems, to explore the solutions, come up with the different ideas of solving them, between them as well.
Yeah, I think getting a direct connection into the teams across, and if you're a global company, becomes even harder, right? Trying to get a mix of what the problems are in different countries and everything. Sony had a platform called the Employee Voice, and this was a representative from all of the countries around. And in the UK, where they had really, really big offices, multiple big offices, they would have a representative from each of those. And I was one of the Employee Voice representatives for the UK. And I think what became really apparent is the problems that we had in the UK part of the organisation was sometimes very, very different to what we'd see in other countries. It's almost like each country had
Mm.
buying policies, as you were saying earlier. You've got different kind of ways that people buy stuff, use stuff, work, recruit, all of that. And you were seeing bottlenecks in different levels of authorities within all of that. One of the nice things is we were able to bring that together and to start grouping these common topics. So each of the reps would have 10 to 15 minutes just to present what they were seeing in their area. And between us, we would then work out what the top 5 things were that you could aggregate together as the big hard hitting things. Every 6 months, we would sit down with the CEO of Sony Europe, so really, really high senior person within the organization. His CFO would be there, and some key people in HR leadership groups. And these guys would be there to just listen. They didn't want to jump in, they didn't want to solutionize straight away. They were there just to listen and get the general temperature of where the organization is across all of Europe in this case. So they could then follow up with it. And actually, that was a really effective means of, my constituents would be able to email me and say they had certain problems or certain issues. We had one where the company changed credit card provider across Europe. This had massive issues for some people, that this credit card wasn't accepted in some countries. Other countries couldn't even apply for that credit card. There was loads of gaps in what the company had rolled out. And it brought finance in to start finding other solutions as to how they can kind of bridge the gaps of what was created. We had that on everything from IT procurement and distribution, a whole load of big ticket operational efficiency issues got highlighted through this and actually resolved. And some it took longer than others, but we generally got progress over the course of the 2 sessions that we have per year.
Yeah, great. I really, really like this example of leaders just listening and creating that space to have those representatives from, different areas of the organization, and just leaders just collecting that information and being more of kind of passive observers before they would jump into any actions and solutions. And that's again, I think that's a common problem as well, that we don't know when to lead and when to listen. And it's so easy to just kind of jump in with solutions and start fixing things without actually first understanding the problem and really digging deeper into to understand how this problem even came about, right?
Yeah,
What is the story, and what is the real impact of this? What is this? What is the impact on how people feel, how people operate? And this is not just even when we talk about, let's say, well-being and mental health, it's we cannot be limiting, let's say, well-being strategy to talking about mental health. It's about enabling entire company to create this system and infrastructure that good health and good well-being, it's an outcome, it's a consequence of good training, good development, good support infrastructure, good communication strategy, and all of that. And really, I think it's time to start think in much bigger, broader terms, and to really align that, really what we are looking at is performance and well-being, right?
Mm.
How our people feel and how well are they able to contribute to the organization, and looking at the relationship between the two, and what affects them, how they feel, what influences their performance both positively and negatively. And one of the nice examples that I could see that actually really surprised me, for example, I was delivering some leadership training to Screwfix, and they have this wonderful system for tracking all of their equipment, so and all of their stock from the logistic point of view. So a lot of other retail organizations, they waste a lot of time chasing invoices, orders, counting stock, counting their products, and they have automated this so well that all you need to do is just scan things as they enter your shop, and when they go into specific locations, and it creates the space for people to then have more time for being human, for having those human conversations, and you're not stressing about some of these other tasks. So yeah, and again, that is something that will affect people's health and well-being, and we don't think very often in those kind of wider terms. So Abigail, thank you for your comments. Says where there is psychological safety, people will be forthcoming with solutions and open communication. Absolutely, that safety and trust, and creating some of those safe spaces to facilitate those conversations, and again having even the tech infrastructure and the systems that make it possible and create time for this, it's also crucial. So are there any areas of concern that, for those who are looking, for those who are listening to us today, what are you seeing in your organizations? What are you looking for in your businesses? What are some of these key areas that you are seeing? We would love to hear some of those key issues. And Darren, let me know what would then be some of the different ways to address those. So we've touched already on things that like understanding the audience needs and wants, and really digging deeper into understanding those areas of concerns and feelings, and getting the story of and the full picture of it.
Yeah.
What else? What are other areas that we need to be looking at?
So, well, there's a very big question that's just come in, and I'll leave you to scan that one in a second. Yeah, first of all, no two companies are going to be the same. So as we go through some of these things, it's important to think that you're going to have to tailor all of this based on your audience. So that's why I always put the very first tip is get some surveys in, get some workshops in with people, get it as wide a bit of intel into what people want out of your organization. By way of comms, by way of training, get that really well documented. But also, once you've started formulating your plan and you know what's there, be flexible, be willing to change it. I heard something many years ago that you're a different person every 5 years, and that's because of your experiences, what you learn, what you do. So if you're creating 5-year strategies for learning and development, it's like probably not going to be hitting the mark. So be reactive, but also I've worked with a lot of people that's like, oh, we did this 3 years ago, it didn't work. It's like, well, it might have been too early, or there might have been one nuance that didn't quite work, or maybe it wasn't launched well. So don't be afraid to revisit stuff you've tried in the past and re-energize it, try it in different ways. Once you know your audience and their needs, content strategy is the most important. A nice one to work with as a framework comes from our friends in marketing. It's not anything I've created off my own back. But if you have the 3 pillars of inspiring, educating, informing your workforce, you'll easily start getting kind of a breakdown of the types of comms you need to be sending out. So the informing piece, this could be your company updates, this could be some org chart changes, this could be you've got a new CEO, a new CFO, whatever it is. Informing your workforce of events that are coming up. They're really important. Educating is all of your L&D, and you've got to really promote that. You can't just create amazing content. You can't buy in amazing content without then shouting about it and saying you've got these opportunities. So make sure you've got that. But then you want to do the inspiring piece. A lot of time you see the inspiring piece as a bit of the onboarding, or maybe even like kind of the pre-recruitment stage where you're talking about your values and your beliefs and everything that the company has going for it. But we don't do anything to show how that's playing through. And that's why I mentioned earlier, let's call out the people that have had the connections and the work they've done for that, because that's the inspiring piece. That's the bit where you can really start kind of pushing the envelope and getting people to really want to be in your organization.
And I think there, Darren, I'm just going to jump in there. Just remembered something as well that we've discussed before, and it's looking at the experience of people who are not necessarily internally engaged in the organization, but for example, how often do we ask new person what is their first impression of organization, right? After your onboarding and training, ask them to say, what are we all about, right? What's our company's vision? What are we trying to achieve, right? What are we known for? Why our clients come to us? And really have that good understanding, like to sense check, have we given the right information and the right awareness to this new employee? Because there is so much to learn from this, because internally we can really kind of get indoctrinated into this is who we are, this is how we work, this is our ways of being and doing. But in reality, everything in the company communicates, right? It's not just words, it's everything, the way we decorate our rooms, the way we set up our offices, what kind of soap we put in our bathrooms, right? Like all of those things actually communicate something about the brand, about the values, and about the company's approach. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of drop that in as you were talking about kind of having that information and sense checking and having those real stories, making sure that we include those people who are at different stages of the organization journey, and really get those stories out of them to see what are you seeing, what are you observing, and aligning that.
Yeah, I mean, I really agree with that. The idea of a company saying it's a premium brand, and then everything around you in the office, from the restrooms that you go into, not being premium in there, kind of starts kind of going against the grain a little bit. It's like, are we premium? We're just saying we're premium. So yeah, there's definitely a lot on that side of things. I think the next one I'd come on to is technology. And I think companies seem to find buying technology quite easy. They seem to struggle to get it resourced well, used well, with the right people, with the right skills. If it's a content system of some description, getting good quality content that's designed for your learners' needs or your employees' needs, that's where people kind of struggle a little bit with that. I know there was in our conversation last week that it's all very well having a really good SharePoint system, a really good learning management system, but if your organization doesn't have the skills to feed it, then it just becomes a dumping ground, a load of rubbish that switches people off more than it engages with them. So, and there's lots of technologies out there. So, if some organizations already have marketing CRM systems where they can do email blasts out to people, this could create really nice graphical, really kind of content heavy articles that you email out to people. You've got to check with, is that the type of format with your employees that they want to be receiving though? Where are they going to be reading this type of content? Is it going to be on their own personal devices? Are they sat in front of a laptop? Understanding not just the type of content people want to consume, but how they're going to be consuming it will instantly advise you on the type of platforms you're needing.
And also, I think they're considering diversity, right? If you are sending all of your communications in a long written format, and obviously this will not be potentially accessible for anyone with dyslexia, with potentially, people who have, shorter attention spans. And again, sometimes it's just preferences that, if we don't provide that information in a way that it's relevant for people and in the way that they prefer to engage with that, then we are losing huge opportunity, and there's a huge gap in knowledge and skills because we haven't transferred that in the right way. Rob was asking us to confirm some of our abbreviations that we're using. So I think we're referring to L&D, so learning and development.
The point you make is really important. So the content strategy you build around what type of content should also involve looking at what type of content you're creating as well. We know from all the research, when I started in learning development 15 plus years ago, people's attention span was already only about 12 minutes for a single piece of content. And 5 years later, we were down to about 5 minutes. So look at where we are now with the TikTok generations. We're well beyond people that are learning just from YouTube now. We're now into a realm of, if you haven't delivered the message you need in under 3 minutes, then they've probably given up. So the attention span is something really kind of important. And I think one of the things in your surveys, in your working groups, is, do people want a big long form newsletter where everything's in and you send that out once a week, once a fortnight, and kind of pack everything into that? Or do actually they want a little drip feed of it every single day? So personally, I'm not an early morning person. I like to get in 9 till 10. I want to just read my emails, see what's going on in the world, and then make the plan for what I'm going to be doing that day. If you've got people that want to work that, having the comms sat there means they're going to be responsive to that. But I also found through Medivet, for instance, that we had certain windows through the day when people had no consultations going on and no client stuff happening. So at that point was when we wanted to target the comms going out, because if it came out while they were in that kind of quiet, the customers are not there period, they're likely to start reading it. The other stuff is also, and this is where people can sometimes get held up on data more than they perhaps need to. If you're working, say, a retail environment where you've got lots and lots of people on the shop floor, it's unlikely that every single one of those is going to read your comms. What's more likely to happen is the manager, the deputy manager, or someone senior within that branch will get the comms and they will cascade it through the team meetings or the little huddles they do first thing in the morning. So I think one of the things we had to do with Medivet is really start showing that despite the viewing figures, it was probably only about 10% on the comms that we're sending out. When you physically went into practice, there were head vet nurses that were cascading that information. And in some cases, they printed out that weekly update and pinned it on the staff notice board so people could read it from there. So I think that's where you've got to be careful on some of the data stories. And that's where you want to look at the outcomes of the training and the comms rather than just the consumption of the comms itself. But technologies wise, look at what you've got out there. We were very lucky at Medivet. We had a really nice learning management system that had all of our performance one-to-ones within it. We could do things called observations as well. We could do all the goal setting within that. And we were able to load in kind of comms. And you're starting to see a lot of learning management systems now are becoming more of an experience platform. And in some cases, some companies are moving away from using an intranet completely. It's kind of very old-fashioned technology, normally on SharePoint, but there are other systems out there. But they're now starting to take over this role of providing information, training, comms, everything that your organization needs. But when you start switching on some of these modules, you've got to make sure people are enabled for them. So when we launched all of the stuff around performance management, the one-to-ones, the goal setting, the observations, we created all of the training for how you get the best out of it. But we also did the training on, here's the cheat sheet on how the employee prepares for it and how they communicate what it is they're doing, what they're working on, and really get the most out of it. And this is how the manager can listen and really kind of reflect back on what they're saying. So we created a lot of these processes and policies with the training all kind of integrated together into one big package.
Yeah, great. So I think definitely what we're looking here is it's really kind of to summarize what we've discussed so far, looking at understanding your audience well and really understanding their needs, understanding the alignment of the message and how aligned we are between departments, different levels and hierarchy of organization, and looking at how we can transfer how we can facilitate that knowledge and skills transfer. Looking at having your content strategy right, set up, not set up in those kind of few pillars of inform, educate, and inspire. Sometimes I think you mentioned, again, having kind of entertainment element there as well. Um, Looking at the right technology, making sure it's accessible, making sure it's not just technology itself, but it's really looking at what is the purpose of this platform. Does it serve the needs of our communication, our culture, our style, and creating more of that? I really like that you refer that to that experience platform rather than, it's just the tech to
Yeah.
push some content, and integrating that entire communication strategy into your daily ways of operating and really understanding how this fits in your company's vision and mission and a brand structure and your daily ways of working, and
Mm.
integrating all of those smaller pieces, your performance management, your one-to-ones, your other internal events, other campaigns. Yacinta before mentioned, and I don't know, I'm probably completely mispronouncing your name, Yacinta, so apologies for that, do correct me. Also mentioned about kind of the pains of being kept in the dark, right? So, and you also, Darren, mentioned that sometimes there are these wonderful initiatives of training or development opportunities, but people who need it the most, they are kept in the dark and they're not even aware of some of those initiatives are being available. So really, really making sure that instead of communicating everything to everyone, choosing who needs to know what and when,
Yeah.
and channeling some of that communication. So it's again going back to that first point of knowing your audience and what is their role in that and what exactly they need to know. And probably not everyone needs to know everything, but really selecting right information and to be communicated to right people at the right times. And
This is where I say the balance between pushing information and pulling information is absolutely crucial to get that balance, because there will always need to be a kind of jungle drum of the organization that's just saying this is what's going on, this is what's out there. But actually you don't want people to become so dependent on you pushing information to them and becoming dependent on that way of, well, you haven't told me that this isn't there, this is there, so I didn't know it was there. You want to open this up. You want to have a completely ungated learning and comms platform where you've got a variety of content out there, an Aladdin's cave almost of stuff that you can find that will help you do whatever you need to do. It was one of the philosophies I was taught by a lady at BP many years ago. We both did a presentation at the Tate Modern together, and she was saying you learn best when you are starting a new job and you're a dry sponge looking to absorb everything. When you're trying to complete a task now or understand something for something you're doing at this moment in time, or where you're ready for your next career step in the future. And you've got to make sure that people know that a big onus is on them to go and find this content as well. It can't all be drip feed, because otherwise the fatigue that people will have from comms and emails coming out would be huger than it is now. So you've got to generate this curiosity that people want to go and find the content out there in whatever form it is. So taking on the different learning styles, taking on people's attention spans, and just how precious time is now. We need to develop lots of different types of content that's going to help land, and that could be infographics, it could be posters that you put around the office, digital signage. There's a whole host of things that you can build into your content strategy and production that will connect with people in different ways.
Yeah, thank you. And I really liked your concept of kind of creating curious environment, right? And I think if we are really creating a safe space where you are always encouraging people to stay curious, to learn more, to be better, to improve, to explore different ways of doing and different ways of being, and other opportunities that are available for them, then we are facilitating much more of that initiative for individuals to take ownership of their own development, of their own learning, and again we are empowering them to maybe come up with some of those solutions for some of those problems instead of just kind of moaning and complaining, right, which can have a huge impact on our company's culture and an environment, positivity of the environment in which we are in. And I think, to summarize something that you said before, and it's starting with that end in mind, right? Making sure that with whatever we build, with whatever initiatives we put out there, looking at what is the goal here, what exactly we're trying to achieve, how exactly does that fit in our broader company's objectives, and really mapping that out in terms of what are we trying to achieve, but also how we're going to measure our success, how we know that it's working, how do we know that this is landing well and people are responding to this in the right way. So yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for everyone who have been engaging. Thank you for your wonderful comments and questions. Darren, if people want to reach out to you for more help, for support, I know you are also available now to do some extra work and opportunities. So if people want to reach out to you for your support, what are the best ways of finding you?
Just connect on LinkedIn. Send me a message. I get lots of people trying to sell me stuff, but it'd be nice to have people that are kind of asking questions about how I can help them. So yeah, just connect with me on LinkedIn, and more than willing to have a little chat.
Great, wonderful. And I can really say that Darren is the most helpful person. He always goes out of his way to do more than has ever been asked. And even when we're preparing for this interview, Darren, you really go out of your way to really do your best and really add as much value as possible. So definitely, like, your support would be an asset to any company who would benefit from this learning and development and communication infrastructure support. So thank you very much. Thank you for joining us. And thank you, everyone who are listening. And we will see you next week, the same time. And enjoy the rest of your day.